hello. Welcome. So happy to have you with us this afternoon on a beautiful day here in Southwest Louisiana. Always grateful to have you spending some time with us right here on the Katie McGrady Show on the Catholic Channel, Sirius XM Channel 129. A special greeting to our viewers on YouTube and Substack who get to watch the opening monologue on video after the show airs. You can go follow me on YouTube and Substack and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, Katie P. McGrady. You can find us over there and watch the opener with some video. You basically just get to see the home studio, my nicely placed photo of meeting the past two popes right behind my face. I've got the window covered with the curtain so that my glasses don't glare too terribly. I thought I bought anti-glare glasses, but apparently it was the other pair of glasses. It wasn't my secondary pair of glasses, which is what I've been wearing more frequently these days because they match my colors. I had my colors done last year. It cost a small fortune for somebody to tell me, don't wear bright red, but orange is kind of your color, which is strange considering I have auburn hair, but beside the point, autumn is my color, and these teal turtle glasses pop, I guess. I don't know. At the end of the day, getting my colors done wasn't the tax write-off that I thought it was going to be. But we can't complain. We're here. We're excited. The window is covered so the glare doesn't, completely and totally flash against my eyes. And we're hanging out with all of you lovely people live on the Katie McGrady Show and later on Substack and YouTube. And today, happy feast of the guardian angels. Happy feast to those angels that come hell or high water are on our side. The guardian angels, each one of us assigned a guardian angel to light, to guard, to rule, to guide. That is what the little guardian angel prayer says, oftentimes the first prayer that a little one learns as a child. And I think sometimes there's misconceptions about the guardian angels. We're going to talk about the guardian angels later on in the show and kind of answer some particular questions. My favorite book about angels is Angels and Demons. No, not Dan Brown's, but Dr. Peter Kreeft's, a fantastic book, Q&A style, that explains angelology. There's a fun word for you. Explains the theology and understanding and study of angels in a pretty robust fashion. I would keep a copy of it in my freshman theology classroom all those years ago. But on the Feast of the Guardian Angels, I can't think first about the guardian angels. I mean, I can. It is their feast day after all. But on this day, 10 years ago today, in fact, the guardian angels showed up for my husband and I in a pretty distinct way. And I love to tell the story because it is such a God wink of a tale and is worth telling because me, analytical, type A, everything has to be just so, yeah, angels are cool, but do we really have to give a whole lot of time or space to them kind of person, was completely and totally knocked on my butt in an encounter with, I'm fairly convinced, my guardian angel and my husband's guardian angel. For some backstory, my husband and I met in May of 2014, Facebook. We're millennials, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that we met via social media. I was on Gus Lloyd's show last week talking about my husband and I's new book, First Reconciliation and Beyond. And Gus asked the question, how did y'all meet? And so I got to tell kind of an abbreviated version of the story. I posted a blog on Facebook. Tommy read the blog. We were Facebook friends because we knew mutual people in the world of youth ministry. He sent me a message. We started talking back and forth. 32 days later, I flew to Pennsylvania to meet him in person. And then a year and a few months later, he moved to Lake Charles, Louisiana. So it is the summer and early fall of 2015. I am a freshman theology teacher at St. Louis Catholic High School. Tommy is the campus minister at St. Louis Catholic High School. At the time, we were incredibly excited to no longer be long-distance dating, and I had a lot of travel on my calendar. So I would teach a full week. I would catch an afternoon flight to leave Lake Charles to go speak at a youth conference or to do a parish mission. I mean, I was kind of all over the place, juggling full-time youth ministry, full-time teaching, and what was becoming full-time speaking. Yes, it was chaotic. Tommy was campus ministering and coaching, so he was pretty busy as well. So nothing's changed in 10 years. We're still pretty busy. Things will slow down in a couple of weeks. That's the joke we like to make. And in September of 2015, I traveled every weekend, or Tommy traveled every weekend. So we had 0 weekends together. We worked at the same school. We were certainly seeing each other quite a lot, but we had no weekends with each other until it was time for the first weekend of October. And that particular year, 10 years ago, October the 2nd, 2015, it was a Friday. And it was the first, and I think if I go back and look at the calendar correctly, it was the first and only weekend that I really had home that entire semester. The next week, Tommy and I were going to a wedding together up in the Scranton, Pennsylvania area. A couple weeks after that, we had a youth conference that we were both speaking at. So we had things that we were doing together, but like we didn't have any home weekends. And as somebody who very greatly values being home, especially when I have to travel so much, it's nice to have home as your home base. I was actually a little disappointed because I had this weekend home, my only weekend home for pretty much the entire semester. And Tommy had told me he was actually going to a bachelor party for his friend whose wedding was the following week. So I said goodbye to my, at the time, boyfriend as he left school on Friday, October the 2nd at about noonish to go catch the afternoon flight out of the Lake Charles airport so he could fly off to his friend's bachelor party. And I stayed and, taught the rest of the day, obviously. A little disappointed that he knew this was my one weekend at home and he'd still scheduled to go on this bachelor party weekend, but I wasn't going to hold it against him. He's allowed to go hang out with his friends. It's not like I didn't, know that I was going to be super busy. I guess I could have said no to some speaking events, but, I was a little disappointed, but fine, whatever. He says he's got to go do this to be with his friend Matt. I'll support him. Well, I texted him at about 2:30. So school, the final bell would ring at about 2:40 in the afternoon. I texted him at about 2:30ish to ask him if the flight had taken off, and I didn't get a reply. I thought that was a little strange, but maybe he's in the air. I didn't know what his flight path was. He hadn't told me what his flight numbers were. He hadn't told me what time his connection was. I'm pretty type A. I usually know those kinds of things. I thought it was a little strange that he hadn't told me, but I didn't think a whole lot of it. The bell rings at 2:40. I decide I'm just going to get the heck out of school as soon as I can. I finish up a few things at my desk. I go to leave. I'm leaving my classroom. I'm leaving the little quad area where the theology classrooms are clumped together. And as I leave, our assistant principal, her name was Miss D, God rest her soul, she since passed away. Miss D walks up to me and she hands me an envelope. And she looks at me and she's got this big smile on her face. And she said, "This is for you." And I was like, okay. I mean, people drop stuff off at the school from time to time. I mean, it's not all that unusual. Maybe somebody had, I truly didn't know what it was, but she drops it, she hands it to me. And I go to open it and she went, "Oh, no, don't open it up right here." I was like, okay. So I leave, I walk to my car, I open up the envelope, and inside is the first clue of what became a 10-clue scavenger hunt through the city of Lake Charles that would result in the end of finding Tommy, who was waiting for me at one of the locations, took me to a lovely dinner, and by the conclusion of the evening, we were engaged. Now that's the abbreviated part of the story. He sends me on this scavenger hunt. We go off to this lovely dinner at this French restaurant. He ends up proposing in the library at the school where we both taught, which happened to be the place where I had been sitting the first time we had Facebook messaged back and forth with one another. So it was a beautiful little engagement and engage-anniversary now, I can say, but this lovely little engagement scavenger hunt that he sent me on around town. And Tommy had it planned out. My husband, who's not super type A, had it planned out like down to the minute. Like one of the clues told me to go home and like get dressed up in like my nicest dress. And then one of the clues told me to go to my parents' house, and that's where he picked me up because he wanted me to leave my car at my mom and dad's house so that by the end of the evening, we would have to go back to my parents' house to pick up the car and, of course, be able to see my mom and dad after we got engaged and they had champagne and cake waiting for us. We went to the parish where I was baptized. Yesterday was my baptism birthday, so we went there the day after I was baptized and we prayed a Divine Mercy chaplet together. I mean, he had it all planned out down to the minute. But there was one little problem, and it was that it didn't take me as long to get ready to go to my mom and dad's house. Like, I just went home, literally took a quick shower, threw on a dress, threw on some makeup, and rushed over to my mom and dad's house where I knew the next clue was going to be waiting. That only took me like 20 minutes, and he thought maybe it would take me like an hour. So we were a little ahead of schedule. So we go to the church, we go to St. Margaret's to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. We finish the Divine Mercy Chaplet in like, I don't know, like 15 minutes. It doesn't take very long to pray a Divine Mercy Chaplet. Our dinner reservations at this lovely restaurant, Le Truffe Sauvage, this very fancy French restaurant here in Lake Charles, our dinner reservations weren't until 6 o'clock. And it was like 5:15. Now, you can show up for dinner reservations early, but you can't show up 45 minutes early. And in fact, this restaurant doesn't even open until 6. So like we could have gone and I guess just like sat in the parking lot. But I could tell that Tommy was somewhat flustered. He thought like I wouldn't get to my parents' house until like 4, and then we would drive to St. Margaret's and we'd get there at like 4:15, and we'd like maybe pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and that would take us until like 5, and then maybe make it like a holy half hour or something. And here we are, like way ahead of schedule. And so Tommy looks at me. We wrap up praying our Divine Mercy Chaplet at St. Margaret's, and he looks at me and he was like, "Do you want to go?" And he pauses for a second. And I didn't know what he was going to say. And he went, "Do you want to go to the, and he stumbles over his words for a second. I think he's trying to think of like where he could possibly take me. And everything is timed out. Like he's literally got the next clue waiting at the restaurant. And he goes, "Do you want to go to Books-A-Million?" So I think of all the places that we could go tonight, right? We've gone to my childhood home. We've gone to the church where I was baptized. We're going to this really fancy restaurant. I didn't know we were going to end up at the school where we both taught, but I kind of had an idea that he was sending me to these important places. Books-A-Million wasn't really on the list. But I say, sure. I know it's not part of the scavenger hunt, but we've got some time to kill, and who doesn't love going to a bookstore? So we get to Books-A-Million at like 5:20-ish, like it's around the corner from St. Margaret's. And Tommy is dressed in a suit and tie. I am dressed in a very nice dress. We look like we're going to prom. Couple of, 20-somethings at the very beginning of October, and we are dressed to the nines, showing up to Books-A-Million on Ryan Street in Lake Charles, Louisiana. We walk into the bookstore, and I mean, I'm happy as can be around books. Like, I can go to a bookstore anytime, any place, and find something to buy, find something to read, find something to enjoy myself with. Like, I love a good bookstore. And so we're just like walking around the bookstore. And as we're walking around, Tommy grabs a book off of one part of the shelf. I go over to the biography section, looking around. I love reading a good biography. We each grab something, and we make our way to the back of Books-A-Million, where they used to have, they don't have them there anymore. They've since like renovated the store, but they used to have this series of like benches set up in the back by the magazines. And I guess the assumption was people will come to the bookstore and like sit on the benches or sit on the chairs and like read the magazines and, almost treat Books-A-Million like a place where you could go and hang out, not just a place where you go and pick up a book. So I go towards the back of the store, and they have this little bench chair combo right opposite like the cooking magazines. And so I go pop a squat. I go sit down. And as I sit down and I kind of get myself comfortable, I grabbed a book that I planned on buying on the way out. I look over to my right, and there is another set of benches just a few feet away. And sitting on this bench, and I'm not trying to be unkind when I say it this way, but sitting on this bench was the oddest looking woman I have ever seen in my entire life. She was so tall, like freakishly tall and thin, with like these really long fingers. And she was wearing the oddest outfit I think I've ever seen somebody wear before. She was wearing like this, and even now, a decade later, I can see her wearing it. You know how like old people sometimes, I say old people, old men, specific types of old men wear like coveralls. Like they essentially wear like an adult onesie. And it's usually like a fairly drab color, like a black or a blue or a brown. There's a guy here in Lake Charles who wears bright red coveralls, right? Like, but just like that, simple, very industrial looking outfit. She was wearing like a two-piece coverall set. So it was this lighter tannish brown. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. It looked like military issue clothing. And it was just this lightish brown color. If you look too quickly, like if your head just like did just a quick pass by, you wouldn't have noticed her. Except for how she was sitting. So she's this very tall with these very long fingers and this very odd, like military looking issued tan shirt and cargo pants. And she was sitting on the bench, crouched like Gollum. Like she wasn't sitting on her bottom. She wasn't sitting with her legs crossed. She wasn't sitting crisscrossed applesauce. She was like crouched up on her feet. Like her butt wasn't even touching the bench. And she's like crouched up, almost like she's about to pounce. And she's flipping through a magazine. And again, I'm making a joke about the fact that the benches are by the magazine section of Books A Million. I am a pretty frequent flyer in Books A Million 10 years ago and today. Nobody's ever looking at the magazines. They're there, and I'm like fairly convinced they don't even update them. Like the magazine section of a bookstore is like the magazine section at the checkout counter at Walmart. Nobody's picking those magazines up. I've never seen anybody pick them up. Have you seen the price of magazines at those places? I bought a magazine not long ago in the airport because it was the special edition of the Entertainment Weekly magazine featuring the cast of The Chosen. $15.99. People don't buy magazines because it's insanely expensive. But here's this lady, tall, long fingers, strange outfit, sitting crouched, looking at a magazine. I instantly clock her because it is just an anomaly. It doesn't look real. And she's sitting there and she's like flipping through her magazine. Tommy comes up behind me and he like sees her too. And he kind of makes the same face that I assume I'm making, like, that's odd. And then we notice next to her is somebody in the exact same outfit, but a man. It is a woman and it is a man, and they are each wearing these strange brown tan collared shirt with these cargo pants, and they are freakishly tall with really long fingers. And she's like crouched on the bench, and he's just like standing there, still as can be. And he sees us as we see him, and he smiles directly at Tommy. I sit down and I've got my book, right? And like I see this couple over there, and this guy is staring right at Tommy. And my husband, who's never met a stranger and who's not made to feel uncomfortable about anything, kind of seems a little uncomfortable. Well, we just kind of do our thing for a couple minutes, and they're over there and they're just kind of together for a couple of minutes, and we're not, we're like 40 or 50 feet apart. We're not far away from one another. And Tommy asks if I want something to drink. There's a coffee shop. We're probably going to be there for like another 20, 30 minutes. Do I want a cup of coffee? Sure, that'd be great. Thanks. So he goes to walk back up to the front to the Joe's Mug coffee shop. And as he goes, tall gentleman standing a few feet away from us, who's still not looking at anything, still not reading anything, is just like standing there still as can be. He follows Tommy. Now, two things instantly come into my brain as I realize this very tall, very strangely dressed man is following who I assume will be fiance by the end of the evening. My first thought was Tommy's about to get mugged, because I am, if nothing else, the kind of person who instantly goes to worst case scenario. So my first thought was my husband's, at the time, my boyfriend, soon to be fiance, someday husband, is about to get mugged. My second thought was he probably wants something. Because my very analytical, overly confused, at times trying to figure out all the worst case scenarios brain is assuming, right, like that these people are down on their luck. Perhaps they just left some sort of prison system and like these are the standard issue clothing. Like I'm trying to make sense of why they look so odd, why they're dressed the exact same. And my brain goes to worst case scenario, he's going to get mugged, or clearly they just left prison and they don't have anything and they're going to ask us for help. I recognize that perhaps I should be going to therapy for some of these anxiety-driven assumptions, but that's another conversation for another day. The guy follows Tommy. And so I tell myself, well, Tommy can take care of himself. And also, if he's not back in like 3 to 4 minutes, then I'll go looking for him. It's not like I'm obligated to stay in this one spot in the bookstore. I'll just go up to the front counter and buy the book that I'm reading. A few minutes go by. Tommy has not returned with the coffee. So I decide I'm going to go looking for him. And I stand up from my spot. And I kind of like smooth my dress down as I stand up. And I go to walk back down the aisle. And there's really no way for me to exit this part of the store without passing right by the woman who's still crouched on her feet with her butt not touching the bench in this very strange outfit just a few feet away from me. I'm going to have to walk pretty much right past her. And so as I'm going to walk past her, I just, I don't want to be rude. I don't want it to be super obvious that I'm kind of weirded out by her. And so I just kind of smile at her because she is watching me as I'm walking. And I smile at her and she looks at me. She stares me down. She had these very vivid eyes. And she's looking at me and she went, "You look lovely, Katie." And I could feel all the hair on my arms just stand up. Because I was 1,000% sure Tommy had not said my name. See, Tommy and I have been together for over a decade. Up to this point, we'd been dating for over a year. We don't say each other's names unless we're angry. And I'm sure plenty of married or long-standing couples do this, right? We call each other babe. Very rarely do I say his name unless I'm calling for his attention. In no scenario would Tommy and I have walked over to this part of the bookstore, sat down, and he would have looked at me and said, "Katie, would you like a cup of coffee?" He would have said, "Do you want some coffee, babe?" I know he did not say my name. And I know he didn't say my name, and I didn't say his name. And here's this woman who has not heard anybody say my name. And it's 10 years ago. Yes, I was somewhat known in Catholic World a little bit, but there's no way this person knew who I was from Catholic World. I had not yet appeared on CNN or SiriusXM. This woman should not have known my name. And she looks at me and she says, "You look lovely, Katie." I can feel the hair stand up on my arms and on the back of my neck. And I am chilled because how does this person know my name? And then the warmest smile breaks out on her face. And she goes, "Say yes tonight." Now, she's got no reason to know my name. And she has no idea that I am currently in the middle of a scavenger hunt that will result in this man that I am sent on the scavenger hunt by proposing marriage. And yet here she is. She's told me I look lovely. She's told me to say yes. And she's got this instantly soothing smile, this very odd person who had this strange outfit and was perched precariously on the bench. Immediately, I am completely and totally calm. And I smile back. I don't remember saying anything back. I nod, and I walk down the aisle to go find Tommy. Tommy is coming down the aisle holding 2 cups of coffee, and he has this somewhat strange look on his face too, almost as if he's just had an odd encounter. And he hands me the coffee, and I went, "Thanks, babe." And he went, "You're welcome. Hey, did you say my name?" As we're walking out of Books A Million, I went, "No, did you say mine?" And he said, "No." And I went, "We don't use each other's names unless we're mad." And he laughed. And I went, "What happened?" He said he got up, and as he walked off to the coffee shop, this guy followed behind him. And 1 second, Tommy was standing by himself, and the next second, this guy is standing right next to him. And the guy told Tommy he looked really handsome and that he needed to be brave tonight. And Tommy then said he asked if Tommy would buy him a cup of coffee. And so Tommy did. He bought him and the woman he was with a cup of coffee. And he was coming to find me to give me my cup of coffee so we could go because we could probably just start making our way to the restaurant. The both of us cannot make sense of it. It was bizarre. 2 people, very tall, very striking eyes. They called us by name. They were wearing the weirdest outfits that people would wear. They weren't even sitting or standing normally. And they call us by name, tell us to say yes and to be brave, ask us to buy them a cup of coffee, and then we head off to dinner. We get into the car, and as Tommy fires the vehicle up, out of nowhere, the radio is turned on in his car. Now, this is the part of the story that every single time I'm too analytical and too skeptical at times to believe encounters with the supernatural. I'm more than willing to admit that I'm the kind of person that needs to be convinced 10 times over that a miracle actually occurred. The kind of person who would frequently tell you, you can't over spiritualize coincidences. Maybe they did just get out of prison. Maybe they were just a couple of odd people who happened to overhear your names or who've been stalking you on the internet. Anything is possible. There's probably some logical explanation. But we get into my husband's black Subaru, which we have since sold. We're like 3 cars away from that thing. And Tommy, my husband, loved this car. And on multiple occasions had fixed all of the various hookups to be able to have the setting in his car to when he gets into his car, automatically it syncs to his phone. And I'm telling you this because his car was old enough to not have Apple CarPlay, but it had one of those USB plugs. And if you didn't have the phone plugged into the USB automatically, the car would just automatically go to like an FM station or to a CD. And Tommy had rigged it up to where and he was so used to doing this, before he'd get in the car, he'd plug in his phone. And so before he'd even turned it on, his phone would be plugged in, so it would automatically sync right back to the thing he'd just been listening to. Because if there's one thing my husband hates, and it's like this weird hatred that he doesn't like the sound of static. Like static radio sound drives my husband up a wall. And so he's very particular about plugging his phone in the second he gets in his car, making sure it was synced to automatically go to USB player. We get in, he plugs his phone in right away. I mean, at this point, it's muscle memory. He starts the car, and the car should have gone to the USB setting to just automatically go back to what he'd been playing before. And instead, he turns on the car, and the radio is on the AM station. And not just any AM station, it's on Radio Maria, the AM Catholic station based out of Alexandria, Louisiana, like 2 hours away, that has an affiliate station here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And the AM Radio Maria station is on in his car. I guarantee a station he had never tuned his vehicle to before, and his phone is plugged in, so it should just automatically go to USB. And it is saying on the AM station, "Today is the feast of the guardian angels. Perhaps you've encountered an angel. Maybe you've entertained them unaware." And the two of us just look over at each other and start cracking up. We sat there for a full 5 minutes, sipping our coffee and laughing about the fact that we were, both of us, fairly convinced that we had just encountered our guardian angels. And they'd called us by name. They'd given us the word of encouragement that each one of us needed. They'd given us a moment of affirmation. You look lovely. You look handsome. They'd confused us just enough, because if anything, I think angels at times like to kind of mess with us, not in a cruel or malicious way, but in a watch what I can do kind of way. Watch how sometimes even the most logical things that your brain tries to make sense of can confuse you and can remind you that God is bigger than anything that you could possibly fathom, and so too his creations, like angels. And that's the story of how, on the day we got engaged, my husband and I are both fairly convinced we encountered our guardian angels. Now, that is as unique of a story and probably the oddest thing that's ever happened in my life. I tell it every year on this day. Earlier today, I texted my husband. I said, "Hey, how about after school, we head on over to Books A Million with the girls?" And he went, "Yeah, maybe we'll find our angels again." So it is a thing that we frequently reference in our relationship. That's our engagement story. I said yes, by the way. He was brave and he asked, and I said yes a little while later. And it got me thinking about the fact that everybody's engagement story, I mean, some people's engagement story might not include angels. I would imagine most do not. And to this day, I couldn't tell you why that happened. Maybe in the next 10 years, we'll get some sort of a reasonable explanation for it. But for now, we're fairly certain on the Feast of the Guardian Angels, the day we got engaged, the Lord gave us an encounter with those guardian angels themselves. I'd love to hear your engagement story. Tell me how you got engaged. Give us a call, 888-322-8465, right here on The Katie McGrady Show. Tell me your engagement story. I'd love to hear how you got engaged. Maybe you went on a scavenger hunt that ended up at Books A Million and you met your guardian angel, or maybe it's, got down on one knee, took you out to a lovely restaurant, or did it at a football stadium. That'd be pretty cool. I'd love to hear from you. Give me a call, 888-322-8465, right here on The Katie McGrady Show. Tell me your engagement story, and we'll be right back here on The Katie McGrady Show on the Catholic Channel, Sirius XM, channel 129.